Hi there, Facebook, or people out there on Facebook world. I just want to see if I'm coming out live before I start and everybody could hear me. If anybody that's watching could just let me know. That would be great. So let's just wait a second before I get going on my live. Okay, so I've got somebody watching. Hopefully, a couple more will join. Oh gosh. So hopefully, can somebody just let me know that they can hear me okay? I've got my earpods in. I'm going to do this spontaneous live talking about adolescents and recalls very quickly. So just let me know. Got people joining. Excellent. So I think I am coming out live. So somebody just gave me a thumbs up. Brilliant. And you can hear me okay? Just let me know you can hear me. Brilliant. Hey Dan. Mwah! Dan Shaw. Oh, good. All right, good. So hopefully people can hear me. So I did have grand plans of doing a live, literally as I was walking my dogs, but as with everything, the weather has curtailed that. But nonetheless, I wanted to do this live very quickly to talk about adolescent challenges and recalls. So, and the reason I wanted to do this live specifically is I'm currently opening up the Jungle book, which is my 12 months into the life of my two puppies, Jungle and Hottie, and now my third puppy, Reset, who you met briefly the other day, and documenting everything that I do with them in terms of sports training and domestic training, how socialization, I talk about socialization, I talk about firefighting reactivity, and I talk about adolescent challenges. Oh, look at the rain. Great. And I just had a little bit of, Hottie is in the midst of adolescent challenges, shall we say, and one of the classic things that goes first is a recall. So things to watch out for, and it's the most common time, in my opinion, when people struggle with their dogs, they have issue with their dogs, they rehome their dogs, they have behavioural problems with their dogs when adolescent kicks in, and it can kick in anywhere from 6 months onwards. And Jungle has just, she's starting to come through it largely. She will probably have another, adolescent challenge in the future, but she went through a spate of adolescent challenges, and very similar to Hottie. And the big one that they both have had was the loss of recall. So a recall, again, Susan Garrettism is a recall, is a reflection of your relationship with your dog, and it is one of those things that you really need to constantly invest in. So throughout your dog's life, even with my older dogs, I invest in their recall. I'll call them back, I'll collar grab them, I'll give them a treat, or I'll collar grab them and I'll call them back, I'll collar grab them and let them go off with my other dogs, or give them a cue to run, etc, etc. Or sometimes I'll say go see if it's somebody that I know. So I'm constantly working on my recalls. Classically, what happens with adolescent dogs is they lose it. So Hottie and Jungle, both amazing puppies. Sorry, I've got just trying to get. I've just been walking my dogs in the rain, and I'm just trying to get the rain and muck out my eyes. So both of them were amazing puppies, really, really, really talented. They grasped the early foundation training really, really brilliantly, which is not unusual certainly for Malinois and for Border Collies. They're both intelligent, high drive, work orientated dogs, especially those two because they are from working lines, so they're going to have an aptitude to do things. And up until probably about, as I say, 6 months, they both absolutely lapped up everything I did with them. And then, what I tend to do with my puppies is I train really, really fastidiously when they're young. So I tend to put loads and loads of work into them and try to sow seeds, which I can then pick up later on as they get older. So I tend to train quite intently, obviously shaping, foundation play skills, bringing the toy back, tugging, etc. I obviously socialising them and all that good stuff. Then they hit adolescence, and then I essentially take a backward step. So my sports training very much goes on the back burner. I abort any great plans to do any progression with their training. It plateaus off, and this is something that people struggle with, that their puppy isn't necessarily making continual progress. Training is going to plateau off with adolescence. And what comes absolutely to the fore as a priority is their domestics. So their domestic recall. Often what happens is it will go, both those dogs as puppies had amazing recalls. So Hottie, obviously I own her mum, and she would do a recall off her mum at 10 weeks old, no problem, 100% of the time. And that's largely because she hasn't quite learnt about the big wide world, and she finds the value back with me. What happens with adolescence is a natural thing that dogs go through. They find the environment and other dogs, etc., far more reinforcing than you. That light was actually quite good. Somebody just flashed there, but so their value goes on to other things, and that ties in with sexual maturity or hormones kicking in, and also them, getting their motion sensitivity kicks in, prey drive kicks in, and it tends to get more intense. So with females dogs, obviously you have seasons around that time. So Hottie hasn't had a season, but definitely with Jungle, she started to get a little bit just randomly spooky, and she's a dog that has an absolutely fantastic temperament, really outgoing, if anything, excessively gregarious and outgoing. But she definitely started to spook bark at just random things. There was nothing there. It was never people, never dogs. It was just literally nothing. And she would see ghosts and start spooking. Real classic sign of adolescence. Hottie hasn't done the spooking as yet, but she has done her strength of her motion sensitivity and the strength of her eye, because she's a border collie, has really, really kicked up on several notches. And she got very, very intent on Jungle, actually. So for several weeks, what I do is I went back to taking her out on her own. So once my dogs have a good recall, I very quickly integrate them with all my other dogs, my puppies, and then I will do recalls off my other dogs. There'll come a point of where my other dogs will take priority over me in our relationship, which is normal, and then I go back and I will walk them on their own, and I'll do lots of singular recall stuff with them. And then I bring them back and integrate them back into my other dogs, and I will be working on their recall. So the general rule of thumb is I will walk my older dogs first, and then I'll come back and get the puppy and take them for a little walk. So my other dogs are less likely to be, really, really super energetic. So that's not going to hopefully allure the puppy to want to chase them. And I can then do recalls off the other dogs. If my puppy chooses to ignore me, I can tell my older dogs to sit down or stand or wait there, which is my generic wait cue for everybody. Stop my dogs moving and go and get my puppy, take the puppy away a couple of steps, call the dog, hopefully I'll get a response. If I do get a response, I release my other dogs and the puppy and let them go off again and repeat that process. Often what will happen is the puppy will ignore you, and I just repeat it, and it's just about consistency. I don't call them twice. If I call them once, I will go, and if they don't respond, I'll go and get them and repeat this process. It is monotonous, it is daily, and it is about 100% consistency when you work through adolescent challenges. So it also means things like ensuring that you don't let your dog seek inappropriate reinforcement. So, for example, Hottie would be a dog that loved to chase things, and she would get very, very fixated on movement. So I wouldn't be taking her to situations or watching her, say, for example, watch other dogs being trained or run around frantically, because very quickly she could get very into that other dog and that motion, and it can be counterproductive. So I will pull my young dogs back from situations where I don't believe they have the skills to deal with. So what I will do is I will engineer a situation. So, for example, if I happen to take my dog on a training day, and there's other dogs moving around, I won't handle my own dog on that particular course, or if I do, I will do snippets on the corner away from the distraction. So I'm engineering the dog to be successful. With Jungle, she definitely would have got very into chasing things, so I worked a lot on her recall. I did a lot where I walked her on her own, so she got very into great. So it's always the youngest dog that I have that the puppies tend to gravitate to, normally because those dogs are really super energetic. The older dogs tend to regulate themselves in a walk, but the younger dogs still filled with enthusiasm, run around, so they tend to latch on to that dog. So Jungle latched on to great in terms of her attention and focus, so that was an easy fix because I could stop great and call her off. Hottie got into Jungle. Because Jungle was still an adolescent and there's not a lot between them in age, I just separated them. I didn't walk them together. It did mean more hard work for me, but at the end of the day, it's at this stage of the game, the first 12 months is really about where you invest. And the first really 12 months to 18 months is really about where you invest in your relationship. A recall is a massive thing that will disappear in adolescence, and classically where people experience the most struggles. It's often where dogs will develop reactive behaviour, so they will become more drawn to motion. So if they see another dog running or they see kids playing football, they find that more tempting. And it's often tied in with when their drive really, really kicks in and their desire really, really kicks in. And often you see an improvement for sports dogs, you see an improvement in their desire. They become more intense when hormones kick in. But from a domestic point of view, they definitely become more challenging. So those are the reason that brought to mind is because I was just walking with all my dogs. Hottie is now back out with all the other dogs, and her recall is massively improved. I totally lost it at one point, and now she was full out running the jungle. I called her very deliberately at a time when she was more likely to make an error, and she spun round and headed back to me, which was a huge breakthrough for us. She would come back, but there would be always a reluctance for the last couple of weeks. She'd come back begrudgingly, so I had to really, really work at when she came back at making sure I had appropriate reinforcement for her, and also using the other dogs as reinforcement. So one of the things that I did was I'd call her back, I'd collar grab her, she'd give me some eye contact or even ask for a hand touch, and then I would say my run cue, which is zoom, and all my dogs would take off. So I used the thing that she wanted, which is the opportunity to run with my other dogs, as reinforcement for doing the thing that I want, which is returning to me. So it's really, those of you that have young dogs that are entering adolescence, don't panic. This stuff is normal. They often get fearful, they often can get spooky. Again, it's when people label their dogs as being reactive or problematic. So again, don't panic about these things. In terms of socialization, I tend to be really, really hyper-vigilant about the experiences my young dogs have. So, for example, I took Hottie for a walk with a friend's dog, same age but a German Shepherd, and he's entering adolescence, and it was probably a little bit too much for her. And she had a little bit of a spook at him, which she's met him loads of times before. I've walked them before, so I knew they had a history, which is a good thing to think about. And she had an initial she went all submissive, and she had a little panic with her, and then we just carried on walking. And as it happened, they regulated and they sorted themselves out. So the reason I chose to at this moment let them run together is because they have a history of getting on. They have a relationship. It might not be a super intense bond, but they have a history of positive experiences. They've been for a walk together, they've gone in a field together, they've sniffed grass, they've sort of had a little bit of a run around with their puppies as much as you would allow them to. So I knew that she would be fine, and she would realise that although she was a bit, she hadn't seen him for a little while, maybe a couple of months, I knew that it would be fine. And the other advantage is I have access, I can meet that dog on a semi-regular basis and repeat it several times. Now, the reason I say that is what you don't want is your young dog to meet a dog that as a one-off. So a classic thing is the dog has an experience, say, for example, with a black dog. Black dog runs up to your puppy, is a bit over-intrusive, or, if it's a male dog, it's inappropriate with your female puppy. If it's a male puppy, it gets, again, a bit too intrusive with your male puppy, which makes it a little bit apprehensive, whatever the reaction, and you never see that dog again, or unlikely to. That one-off experience can often resonate and create a long-lasting problem, and your dog become apprehensive about other black dogs. So it's really important for me that I am vigilant about the experiences my dogs have with other dogs. I tend not to over-socialise them with dogs that I don't know and they've had an experience with before, and I'm unable to access in the future because of that very reason. If they have that negative experience, I can't do anything to undo that damage. So some things there to consider with adolescence. Adolescence is inevitable. I've had dogs with minimal issues in adolescence. Maybe in all the dogs I've had, one or two, and even those dogs had issues. I think they lost their recall, and that was about as severe as what it got. Other dogs I've had major problems in adolescence. Punch was really, really challenging in adolescence. Strut was that was my Malinois, really challenging in adolescence when they got very hormonal and they got very, very challenging in their behaviour. So again, I just went back to hand feeding, focus games, recall games, policing who they would interact with, and being really vigilant about the experiences they have. So just some stuff there about adolescence. I just was doing this live. As I say, if you want to join the Jungle Book, I'll put the link in this in the comments. Sign up. It's the 12 months of the life of Jungle, Hottie, and now Reset, and you can see the stuff that I deal with. So you'll see me working through challenges and letting you see how I've dealt with when Jungle didn't have a recall and she ran off across the field and she didn't want to come back, and how I worked through that. Same with Hottie, and Reset will inevitably have the same issues. You will see socialization with other dogs. You will see how I deal with developing frustration tolerance, how I proactively deal with preventing them developing reactive behaviour. So a whole spectrum of dog ownership. So if you're interested in signing up, I'll post the link in the thread. If there's any questions, let's have a look. If there's any questions from anybody on any adolescent stuff. Okay, I'm just gonna give it a minute. This is sometimes. Oh, there we go. Reset. Yeah, yeah. He's a special boy. Something's just meant to be really with him. I was going to do a live with him this week, but unfortunately he's cut his pad, or he's cut his leg, so he's absolutely fine. But I thought it best not to. He's on lead walking really. So, anybody else got any questions about adolescent stuff? Curious if the spookiness at Ghost stays or just a phase. It's normally a phase, Sarah. So with my dogs, so the caveat to that is, if your dog has a baseline good temperament, if the dog has a baseline good temperament and is genetically sound, I solemnly believe that the spookiness will come and it will go. And people often panic about it, and they try to, if the dog spooks at, I don't know, a dustbin, they try to reward around the dustbin and I literally, if the dog spooks at a dustbin, I casually ignore the dustbin and keep on walking. I don't make a big thing of it. I don't overindulge it, because they've got to realise the dustbin doesn't hurt them, and the dustbin is going to be there, and we're going to walk in that field tomorrow, and the dustbin's not going to be a serial killer. Things like that, I don't tend to panic about. If it's something that my dog shows a real extreme response on, then I might do some counter-conditioning or desensitization. But generally speaking, that little spookiness, so all mine have done it. So all my female bitches from my foundation bitch Fire have all done. Fire did it 3 months off her first season. She randomly spooked at ghosts. Sure as eggs are eggs, I could have put a pin in the calendar. 3 months later, she came the season. Her daughters are all doing it, and I'm assuming that Hottie will do it at some point. So I'm waiting for it to happen. I'm not going to make a big deal out of it. I'm just note to self, so that I can be vigilant around her coming season, and how that then affects my other dogs in the house. That's the other caveat. Okay. So generally speaking, it will come and go. I think often people make such a big thing out of it that it can get they can actually make a problem. All right. So chasing birds, how do you deal with chasing birds and chasing traffic? So motion sensitivity, as a broad, all-consuming topic, whether it's birds or whether it's cars, I harness the dog's desire to chase onto me. So I up the ratio of chase games. So I will do loads and loads of restrained recalls. I will do hide and seek recalls. With Hottie, she likes to do this thing where she runs around a tree, and I try and fake the way in which she'll run around a tree, and I'll race around and I'll lose her. So I'm transferring her desire to chase onto me. With herding breeds and dogs that have prey drive, it's classically when their drive increases. So if you think of it logically, that's when farmers would probably do the work with them, take them out and start to test them on sheep. They tend not to put, you might see little videos of puppies, but generally speaking, they start to do little bits when they're, of age. And that's when their drive really kicks in. But prior to that, you won't see their real intensity. So I tend to put more emphasis on me, loads of recall games, proofing against movement, so on a bed, moving stuff, train them against my other dogs. And the other thing that I will do is put motion or chasing on cue. So like I talked about earlier, my cue for my dogs to run is zoom. So if I say zoom, they'll all take off. And it actually stemmed from a dog years ago that actually likes to bird chase. And he had a good recall, so it didn't matter. He used to chase pigeons when I lived in London. Never was a problem because they'd always get away from him. And he used to blat across the park, or crows was the other thing. And then they'd take off, and that was his little thing. But because I had a good recall, I'd put it on cue and harness that to my advantage. A chase irrespective of whether it's vehicles, birds, dogs, people, things, ensure that they don't rehearse it in other situations. So if you think there's going to be birds around, think harness or long line or collar, or head collar, so the dog can't rehearse being drawn by them. Take them to environments where they're unlikely to see birds above, so wooded areas or open fields where you can see everything around, so they don't get into birds flying and getting drawn off by them. Hottie would absolutely chase birds if given the opportunity, but as I say, I'm working on her recall. Chase me, chase me, chase me. All right, and therefore not allowing it to get onto other things. Yeah, made me feel better already. Oh, good. What else? Do you ever use long line walking? When do you lose record to prevent self-rewarding? Yes. So, I actually, I do use a long line on my dogs in situations where I can control. So, I will put a long line on a puppy, but I will use it not to get the dog back, just as a safety measure. Where, for example, I walk in a lot of public places. And sometimes the roads, etc., are very accessible, so I need to make sure safety first and foremost. So if my dog is off lead, I've got them on a long line, so that if worse comes to worse, I can grab the long line and pick up. I don't use the long line to get the dog back. That's really, really critical. Otherwise, you will not have a recall without that long line being on the dog. All right? Okay. Tips for a smooth first season with other neutered dogs and bitches in the house. So, when they have a season, it's really unknown what the dog's going to do. I've had, some dogs get really, really high. What you tend to know is, certainly with mine, is there will be a change of the dynamic slightly. So you might see some posturing, you might see some little, resource guarding stuff, minor stuff. And I would be hyper vigilant with all that stuff. And just be mindful. With my male dogs, I tend to, with my female dogs, I've had it where I have separated them at my males and my female bitch in season. I have the facilities at home to do that. If it become really, really problematic, I have a friend that will have my dogs, and in truth, to keep the peace at home, that is an option for me and with my dogs. And she has castrated dogs, so it isn't a problem. But if you are, just be really super vigilant and ensure that you keep a balance on the whole house. So when my dogs are like that, I tend to hand feed them. I tend to back off doing too much intensive training, sports training, certainly, just because their focus can sometimes be lacking. And I tend to police any issues around resources, toys, food, etc., to prevent an issue escalating. On the Jungle Book, I talked extensively about the issues that I had with two of my dogs and how I overcame it on there, right? Would you switch from walking near traffic for now? Yes, absolutely, Sam. I would don't allow the dog to rehearse that behaviour. Here's a really big secret of how to prevent behaviour. Do not allow your dog to rehearse it. That's the biggest secret, the cheat to the way in which I train is, if I see a problem developing, I stop my dog rehearsing that problem. So if, for example, my dog is motion sensitive, I don't allow them to see things that are going to lure them to chasing. So, for example, when Fire, who's now 7, 8, no, she'll be 8 November, she's 7, she was 6 months old. I met up with a friend, actually my friend Dan, and we had our puppy since 6 months old. We'd done a bit of training, a bit of restrained recall stuff. She was fine, not really interested. Then Dan, who's a really, really good motivator, took off with his dog and did a recall with his dog Geek, and she spun around, just started to bark hysterically. I aborted the plan, I stopped, I took her out the area, and I then went, that's it, she's not going to be exposed to that until I have control over her. And that was one instance, and now she's got fantastic self-control around motion. But it was that one instance which I knew was in her that I was absolutely vigilant and not allowing her to rehearse. Alright? Okay. We can now walk slide. Awesome, excellent, Anthony. Great to hear you have made headways with your dog. Love to hear that. Okay. All right. I think that's it. As I say, I'll post the link for the Jungle Book if you want to sign up. Doors are open till the 7th, so you've still got time. if you want the opportunity to get a free pass into that group, yeah, it's a private Facebook group where I post videos every week with updates of my dogs and do lives, and I post webinar stuff on there, exclusive content, not on any other not available in any other of my groups. You can get the opportunity to win a place on that course for free by simply sharing the video that I did last week of me training Reset. That's all you have to do. Share that video, tag me in the video, and you will be eligible to get a free place, a draw to randomly be picked out for a free place to get that. So if you are interested, and I know that it's challenging times at the moment, simply, you've got to be in it to win it. Share the video and you have an opportunity to get a place on that course for free. Alright, I'm going to love you and leave you and get home, and yeah, because it's getting late, and I've got a steamy window, so it's all getting a bit weird. Alright guys, love you and leave you. Hopefully that's been helpful about adolescent dogs. As I say, any feedback, any comments, post them and I'll pick them up. And I will share the link to the Jungle Book for those that want to sign up on the thread below. Alright, see you later. Bye.